People's Democratic Party has dismissed the 49.7 trillion naira 2025 federal budget proposal presented by President Bola Tinubu as unrealistic, opaque and insincere. In a statement by the PDP National Publicity Secretary, Debo Ologunagba, the party describes the budget as anti-people, warning that its implementation would worsen insecurity, poverty and despair. The PDP also criticizes the budget presentation, alleging it was riddled with unverified economic figures and empty campaign promises. But the party accused the Tinubu-led administration of failing to make meaningful investments in critical sectors such as agriculture, electricity, petroleum, and small and medium-scale enterprises. These sectors, it argues, are essential for economic growth and stability. We're now being joined by public budget expert Dr. Emeka Ejikonye and Chief Economist of SPM Professionals, Dr. Paul Alaje, to provide more reactions to the budget proposal. Thank you, gentlemen, for joining us on the news tonight.
Thank you so much for having us. Yes.
I mean, we are seeing reactions. The president did describe this as an ambitious but necessary budget. What do you say, Dr. Ejikonye?
Yeah, thank you very much for having me here once again. And let me take my cue from a statement the Senate President made while giving his address earlier today. He said, you can, even though he used this in a different context, you can't continue to do one thing the same way and expect a different result. You see, for me, we have been using this approach to budgeting right from independence, which we inherited from the British colonial administration, and it has not been working. Our social situation has been degenerating from then on. I mean, if you can recall the popular statement by the late Alaje that he would only, you can only say Nigerians are poor when he sees them eating from the gutter. That was under the Shehu Shagari administration. Our situation has been degenerating. We have been celebrating, every year we celebrate this document. We celebrate this document. From my own perspective, what we should have been celebrating today, what we should have celebrated today, should have been the effect of this document that should have been submitted to the National Assembly a year ahead of time, such that this, if, from what I'm, because there's an alternative approach to budgeting, which from my own informed perspective, we can apply. In fact, for me, the most fundamental reform of any government in Nigeria today is budgetary reform.
Okay.
I am not excited, I'm sorry to say, and it has nothing to do with politics, please. It's purely from academic, well-researched point of view that we cannot continue to put the cart before the horse.
Great, and there's nothing to apologize for. It's your views. Dr. Paul Alaje, what do you say about the budget?
Well, it's an exciting moment when the president said that the budget is ambitious, and I could hear PDP also say it's an ambitious budget. Unfortunately for the two of them, the budget is not ambitious. In fact, the budget is so small. When you look at it, what the two, both the ruling party and the main opposition, don't understand is that we are suffering from money illusion. This budget is still within 30 billion that we have always done. What makes it so humongous is because we devalue the currency. The budget is still 30 billion. 30 billion in dollar terms. People say, oh, we don't want to hear dollar terms. But remember that the president and the central bank says they want to grow the economy to be $1 trillion economy.
Right.
Where so many other economies...
2030.
In 2030.
5 years away from now.
Yes. So if you look at it, we want to grow economy to $1 trillion economy, but we are budgeting, according to the presentation today, a meager $30 billion. That tells us a lot. There are things that are fundamentally wrong. Even this 30 billion, unfortunately, I'm afraid, we might not be able to finance it. And that is where we can now say it's an ambitious budget, because where do we get the fund to manage this budget? And when you look at the budget, maybe when we get to the details, interesting items in the budget. So if you tell me, is this budget huge? In naira terms, yes, it is. But in the real sense, it is not, because when you compare Nigeria budget with what South Africa is doing, far ahead of what we are doing. Compare it with what Egypt is doing, far ahead what we are doing. Compare it with what Brazil is investing in the economy. The Brazilian economy is investing more in terms of the largest fiscal document in the economy. But when it comes to Nigeria, we saw 40 something. That tells us how we have devalued the currency called naira, and it's taking us, all of us perhaps, on our back. Okay,
Dr. Ejikonye, is it a fair comparison when we compare Nigeria to those countries that Dr. Paul Alaje has mentioned? And also the Speaker of the House of Representatives also made that fact that, we're still far below from where we should be. But I wanted to ask you, because the President and the government says recovery is in sight, citing a trade surplus of 5.8 trillion naira and our foreign reserves at about $42 billion. Isn't that good news? Are we not moving?
You see, these countries you're talking about here, my brother here is referring to, there are certain guarantees in their budgetary process to track expenditure, such that if he says this biro he's holding, I want to deploy 10 naira to it, I will achieve that biro. Exactly. I will achieve this pen, not any other. There must be, I'm not so much bothered about the volume of the expenditure. What I'm thinking about is, because budgeting is the instrument in the arms of government to deliver public services for improving the quality of livelihood of the citizenry. If you don't have guarantees for monitoring and evaluation through administrative performance auditing, which we don't have in Nigeria, all these countries you're talking about, they monitor, they track their expenditures. Do you understand? Every kobo is tracked to the point where it's supposed to be used, so that you will get the benefit of what you initially aimed for it to achieve for you. So unfortunately, we don't have these guarantees in Nigeria. That is why I don't want to use the word, well, let me use the word pessimistic. I am not excited, because I know that this is what we have been doing all this while. Nothing has changed from what happened by this time last year and what we are doing now. There's going to be another record passage of the budget. Last year I thought it was a major record, because the Senate passed. Don't forget, we are talking about 49.7.
Yes.
But this thing goes to the Senate and comes back, we'll be talking about 50 trillion. I want you to tell you, because then you will start talking about budget party. In fact, your earlier program, I had the anchor talking about budgeting in Nigeria being government of the government, by the government, and for the government, not really for the people. It's unfortunate. We must transmute from what we have, the approach to budgeting, to a new approach that will bring in this management angle. Budgeting is supposed to be an instrument for managing public policy, not managing public finance.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great. So Dr. Ejikonye is not happy about this budget. He's pessimistic about it. He doesn't even see our trade surplus and our foreign reserves as even good news to him. Honestly, he's not moved by that.
I'm not.
But for you, are you moved by that? It's not enough to couch the figure. And like you said, gentlemen, this is still a proposal. The National Assembly is going to have its own input, as we have always known with constituency projects. They have made a case for today again. So it's most likely going to cross that 15 trillion naira mark. But Dr. Paul Alaje, it's not enough to couch the figure to say, okay, we're going to have a budget of about 50 trillion naira. It's how do you fund it? Where are we going to get the money to operate this budget? When you look at the parameters there, are you optimistic?
Well, 2024 budget. I remember I spoke with one of your colleagues in Lagos, Mr. Bosin Omofai, at about this time last year, when the 2024 budget was presented. I remember that budget was tagged budget of hope. I said, I hope we'll speak again in December for us to know how much of hope we have gotten from 2024 budget. Because the budget said exchange rate will be between 700 and 800 naira to the dollar. I said, don't expect anything less than 1,500 today. Government is just now realizing that exchange rate will be 1.5, when the projection for next year is already telling economists in research firms that Nigeria exchange rate will be more than 1,500. You see, so from the beginning, the assumptions are not reflecting the reality of what it should be. This is even an improvement. Remember when MTEP was presented to the assembly, it was 1,400. Now when budget is coming, it increased by 100 naira to 1,500. Now that tells me policy environment is what will determine whether this budget will be a game changer or to be just be like the 2024 budget. And what would that be? If the policies that are currently driving 2024 budgets remains the same without substantial improvement in the fundamentals, I am sorry, we might not have so much of gain. Yes, you would see GDP growth rate. President alluded to that, the National Bureau of Statistics reported over 3.4 or 3.6 GDP growth rate for Nigeria. Yeah. You know the truth? Yes, but of what growth? Economy that was $400 billion now reduced to $200 billion. Which of them grew? Do we really grow? We grew 50% of loss due to enrollment or due to eroding the value of our currency, because at the end of the day, we're going to compare Nigeria with the rest of the world. You know why that comparison is important? Brazil is the largest population in Southern America, and it has the largest economy. Guess what they also budget? Among the largest in terms of budgeting in their fiscal life. Check America, the largest population in Northern America, and the same, invested the most when it comes to the economy. Check China and India, they are doing their best in their region of Asia. But look, come to Africa, where you have Nigeria, the largest population. By implication, you should expect largest to go to the people. In dollar terms, you should also expect the largest to go into such economy when it comes to a GDP growth rate. But we've lost the first position, we've lost the second position, we've lost the third position, maybe fourth position. Perhaps that's not where we are now. Not my figures. According to World Bank, according to IMF, Nigeria has lost so much ground in recent time. Why? Because policy of flotation, which actually led to devaluation of currency. And we're speaking to those who care to listen, that yes, it's important to rescue the soul of Nigeria economy, but we must be careful not to behave like a patient who doctor has told that you have an infection, and this infection will disappear in 10 days, only if you can take antibiotics, one in the morning, one in the evening. But the patient felt, let's take all the antibiotics together in one day. Okay. And when you swallow it, you're going to see miracle. What will happen? It will affect the kidney of such patient. What is it affecting Nigeria economy? It's affecting poverty. World Bank says 10 million people have joined poverty bracket only from January to September. Not my figure. IMF is saying this Nigeria inflation is now unimaginable. Why? Because it also have returned, but rather than inflation returning, according to Mr. President and National Bureau of Statistics, inflation has grown to 34.64%. Yeah. Not my figure.
And let me bring in Dr. Ejikonye back into this conversation, because that's another projection that was made in this budget, that we would see inflation from the current 34% to a 15% with this budget in 2025, Dr. Ejikonye. And I also wanted you to respond to, how are we going to fund this budget? There's a 34 trillion naira in revenue. How realistic is this? Where is the money coming from?
You see, when you talk about inflation, for me, inflation has to do with productivity. Reduction in inflation is a function of your capacity to produce. If you produce goods, people can buy and prices will drop, right? That's my take. I'm not an economist. I read public administration with specialization in public budgeting. So that's my area. I'm not a pure economist like my brother here, who speaks the economic language. I speak a public administration language. Yeah. And I'm saying, you can afford to, the economists can tell us where we raise money from. There's something in what we're doing today, revenue mobilization. Here in budget, we're talking about expenditure allocation, right? Yes. But my own concern is, what are the guarantees that when you plow this money, this huge sum of money, which he is saying actually that is small, given the devalued rate of the naira, is quite, I agree with you. But what I'm saying is, when you plow this money into an administrative framework of the kind of civil service we have, highly entrenched, highly traditional, what is the guarantee that that money will get to the people, to service of the Nigerian people? These are my concerns. What guarantee have we put in place to track this expenditure?
You don't see such guarantees?
It's not there. Look, I made a presentation to the National Planning Commission, and I raised this issue of monitoring and evaluation. They told me something about what they call IMAP, where they tell Nigerians to give them videos of government projects in their locality. We have elected you into government. You are the government. You're supposed to use the civil service to deliver service. Why are you bringing Nigerians in. It's your responsibility to put in to put in guarantees, safeguards to be able to monitor the money you spend, to make sure it gets to the people and deliver the service to the people. You don't. To what extent has that been able to? This IMAP, to what extent has it been able to actually achieve the purpose of governance, reducing the poverty level of Nigerians? It has not. That's what I'm saying. There is need. For me, the most fundamental reform, and I'm begging Mr. President, please, sir, let us reform. I listened to you outside before off camera when you were talking about the policy environment. I listened to you while we were discussing outside. The policy environment is flawed. It is highly defective. And you said something about 9 months. Under 3 months, we can change the framework of governance. Budgeting is the instrument for laying the foundation of good governance in Nigeria. Budgeting is the instrument for actually nurturing the public service delivery effort to improve the quality of livelihood of the people. But unfortunately, our approach to budgeting, I'm sorry to say, where we look at budgeting as purely an instrument for managing financial resources rather than institutional resources. Yeah. Because the problem of Nigeria is not finance, it's not how to spend money or how to make money. It is how to deploy money.
Great.
That is our problem.
Great. So are you, are you encouraged at all that we do have a National Assembly that should scrutinize this budget and take out oversight functions over these projects where these monies will be deployed? Don't you think that's a measure in place? Are you encouraged by that at all?
You see, my dear, let me tell you one thing. Like, let's use example. I'm sorry to say, using the example of the United States, our democracy is modeled along the line. The American president submits 4 budgetary documents to the Congress each year. At the beginning, he submits the budget proposal, which is what the president has done today. That budget document is submitted via proxy. The special advisor to the president or whoever is the liaison between the executive and the president and the Congress gives it to them. Nobody hears about it. In the middle of the year, the president of the submits another document, budgetary performance report, mid-year budgetary performance report. At the end of the year, or by the beginning of this year, and when you hear the American president State of the Nation address, what the American president is submitting is the outcome of that document, of the submitting of the subsisting budget. It is the effect, the social effect. So we must have a situation where we say, one, we submit, the president submits this. Like coming back to what you said, what the National Assembly will do again is rubber stamp this document. Because one, they don't have the time for thorough analysis. There's no time. You talked about passing budgetary, the budget bill before the Budget Appropriation Act before the end of the year to which it relates. It's not possible. It can't be done unless you just want to. For you to do this, the legislators must require information on the performance of the subsisting budget, right? Yeah. To be able to build the new budget. Unfortunately, we have not been able to do this.
That's not happening.
It's not happening.
Dr. Paul Alaje, let's look at, we've talked about the parameters, but let's look at the priorities of this budget that a lot of people have been praising. Defense and security is getting a whopping 4.91 trillion naira. That's from the 3.8 trillion naira in the last budget. We have infrastructure having a 4 trillion naira. Health is getting a 2.48 trillion naira, and education has 3.52 trillion naira. Are the priorities right? Are they encouraging?
Clear priorities. Mr. President has selected key sector. For me, security top the list. Infrastructure follows, health and education. But something seems to overtake the top 3, put them together. Something. That is, when you had security with infrastructure and health, a single item that benched all of them is debts. Why 2024 budget did not have so much impact was because of debt. Debt service alone, according to Mr. President, will take over 13 trillion. That is, it will sink security allocation, it will sink health allocation, and indeed it will sink infrastructure allocation. Not to pay the debt, but to service the debt, according to Mr. President. Here is it. When you also see these figures, they look like a major improvement from 3 trillion to 4 trillion, but no. What you need to check is what was exchange rate in the previous
so budget. The naira to the dollar term.
What is it today? You now see that actually in the real sense, we should be doing ×2 of what we did last year to those figures this year. Because when you look at economics is thorough. It's not just I tell you that exchange rate is worse off by 200%, but I increase your salary only by 20%. How would you cope in similar economy? So in the coming period, I'm happy that it's with the National Assembly. Then you made mention of the issue of where will revenue come from.
Yes.
A lot of windows that revenue will come from. First, we need to block leakage that is happening in Niger Delta. Our president has said we will do 2 million and 2.06 million barrels a day. As I talk to you, we've not achieved that target. Bureau of Statistics reported first half of the year, we did average of 1.4 million barrels, which is a bit above about 60 or 70% of what we should be doing. What must we do? We saw a lot of revelation of how crude is stolen in Nigeria. That is oil window. From non-oil window, we've seen the president with tax reform.
That is stalled at the moment.
That is stalled at the moment. I think I have said that some of the things that needs to be changed in that tax reform, we should quickly change them so that perhaps government will have so much revenue that is required to put in. But if you think that we will pass it the way it is, honestly, like as envisaged, and I've mentioned in a town hall meeting that was organized, that I'm sorry, many sections of Nigeria will say no to it. After all, you cannot win a battle or at the beginning when you are not Michael Jackson, except and only if Tony Joshua is fighting Mr. Macaroni. Maybe within first round he will win. But Nigerians are equally interested, especially at this time today, in what is happening to the economy. And I hope that we'll make those changes. Revenue is there and we'll be able to grab it and make our country to grow beyond where we are
Thank you very much. But I want to give Dr. Ejikonye the final word, if you can, in 30 seconds. How do we ensure that all of these figures we're talking about, all of this that we are mentioning today, the ordinary Nigerian on the road can feel its impact? The president has talked about inclusive growth and stimulus. I know you're not optimistic. I know you're not happy about the budget, but this is what we have. How do we ensure Nigerians partake of this inclusive growth the president's talking about?
Honestly, I'm looking at the camera and I'm begging Mr. President, please, sir, please, I'm begging you, let's attach the same level of prominence you're attaching to the tax reform, to budgetary reform in this country. If you do that, all these monies you are trying to plow in, will you achieve it?
Okay.
Honestly, that's my take.
That's a good place to leave it. A message to Mr. President. I must thank you, gentlemen. Public budget expert Dr. Emeka Ejikonye and Chief Economist of SPM Professionals, Dr. Paul Alaje, both doctors. Thank you for providing your insights on the 2025 budget proposal.